I'm purposely making swim run a sport that isn't just for the elite. We have to make this sport here for your everyday swimmer or your everyday runner who's going to train a bit more in their weaker discipline and just have a crack. So no, I'm pretty excited. I love the variety of people.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boys, a swimrun podcast. I am Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 204 of the show. We're going down under this week to chat with Slade of Swimrun Australia. We recorded this conversation the week after their newest event took place in the Gold Coast of Australia, and it was super fun to get the lowdown on the swimrun scene down there, plus get a mini race director's report on how the event went, and a lot more. This was fun.
We don't hear from down under too often.
No, we don't.
So it's always good to hear from down there. But first, training update. So we, as you may have heard last week, it's officially off-season time. While we don't have a training update to share today, we would like to share that we have survived our first gauntlet of the holiday season, Thanksgiving.
Yes. Did not
small. There's a little bridge, a couple bridge weeks before another one. There, we managed to not go completely overboard, so that's a win in our book. We had our annual Low Tide Boys hike.
Yeah.
I would say minimal carrying of the children. I mean, you had to carry. I think I might have gotten off the hook totally.
I don't think you carried anybody.
Wow.
Yeah, I carried my son Javi for a while. In terms of, I always measure that hike. It's always fun, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's always some amount of ordeal at some point.
Of course.
It just turns into an ordeal. You almost can't help it. This year on the ordeal meter, it was pretty low. It was
relatively low.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Next year, I bet we could probably go the full loop with no.
Yeah.
I think we're almost there.
Yeah.
We're almost there. And then before you know it, the kids won't even want to go on the loop.
Right.
We'll have to force them.
You guys are so lame.
Now for this week's shout out.
All you do is talk about swimrun. This week's shout out goes to Adriel Young. Adriel is a 4-time Swimrun World Champion, former guest of the show, and an amazing ambassador for the sport. Mm-hmm. How amazing is he, you might ask, Chipper? Well, in today's interview, we learned how he literally brought swimrun to his homeland of Australia. And we can't think of anything cooler, than literally introducing the sport in the form of the first event ever held there to an entire country. So, so that's super cool. We hear about that in today's interview, but worthy of a shout out.
Very worthy. All the way back in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Kicking it old school. Adriel the Legend Young, as he's known in some circles. Now for this week's Feats of Endurance. This week's winner goes to everybody that raced Swimrun Hydra in Greece over the weekend. They're not dealing with cold fronts in Greece right now.
Nope.
They're living it up. Special shout out to Strava Club members Toby and G-Flow, Chrissy and Bill, a.k.a. Mr. and Mrs. B, and Hendrik, a.k.a. the Swimrun Papa, who raced. Very smart of the Papa to get to a little bit of warmer climate for his monthly swim run.
For sure. Yeah, and I found out on Instagram, this isn't Strava people, but the wee swimrun folks from Wales went down there to do it, so that's pretty cool too.
Awesome. Way to go. Greece is probably a great time this year to get away from that England or United States or anywhere you're shivering your arse off there. Make sure you head on over to the Low Tide Boys Strava Club. Join swim runners for around the world as they train for stuff and things like that. The off-season stuff. You get to see what people's off-season things are up to this time of year.
I love the witty titles.
It's always it's a good way to kill some time either in the pool or running on the trails or whatever. Yeah. Think of whatever witty title you can.
I've definitely had runs where I came up with an awesome title, and it just totally made the rest of the run. The whole run, I'm like, this is a great title.
I feel like we've also have had runs where we have workshop titles, and we're like, okay, I think this one's good. I kind of want to go with this one, but you might take it too, so we'll have to adjust or put up each individual's.
There's been some good ones over the years. I think one time we did the Ninja Loop, and I think one of us forgot a headlamp.
Yes.
So we called that one 2 Ninjas, 1 Lamp. That was the all-timer.
That's solid. That's on the podium.
Yeah.
That's on the podium of Strava title names. Now for a little bit of show business. So voting for swimrun.com's second annual awards is now open.
Maybe add some of air horn. Bam, 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 bam. One of those.
I could do the we can get some pomp and circumstance in here for sure. Make sure you head over to their website. If you didn't catch that, it was swimrun.com second annual awards. So head on over to swimrun.com to submit your choices for the best swim run in Portugal, your favorite swim run socks, and other cool categories. Voting is open till the end of the year, so you have time, but you don't have that much time. So don't wait to cast your votes. And yours truly, the Low Tide Boys, we're also judges.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. I guess there's like an official selection and then the popular vote kind of thing.
What are we?
I think we're the official.
Oh yeah. We choose our favorite races or our favorite gear as well. So head on over to swimrun.com to vote on the annual Swimrun Awards. Always a good time.
Yeah. It was cool last year. It's a great idea. Glad they're doing it again.
Now for this week's interview with Adriel Slade of Swimrun Australia.
Yeah, it was super fun to chat with Andre. In short, he gets it.
He gets it.
He totally gets it. In this conversation, we chatted about how he discovered Swimrun, when he decided to start hosting events, what the burgeoning Swimrun scene looks like down there, and so much more. He reached out to us after, I think it was the week of the Gold Coast, and he was just, asking some questions. I was like, dude, let's get you on the show. Oh, because what happened, he heard our live podcast in Austin, and he was like, "Hey, you mentioned Australia, Swimrun Australia."
He wanted to know more.
He's like, "That's us." I was like, "Let's get you on the show." He said, "Okay," and
here we are.
Yeah, he was like, "I have a race this weekend." I'm like, "Can we do it right after so we can get a little race report?" Dude, he was all about it, so it was super fun to chat with him.
Absolutely, very very cool. One that he listens to the podcast as well. And we turned it around so quick there, but also we know we do have a listener base down in Australia, so always trying to turn everybody on to all the good things about there on that very vast country.
Yeah, and made some good points at the end there around helping Australians if they want to be on a world championship journey.
Yeah,
how to facilitate that, because there just aren't any merit races or anything close. So so it was cool.
Well, without any further ado, we'll hop along to our conversation with Adriel Slade, race director at Swimrun Australia. Do their gels open the other way? Upside down?
Okay, very stoked for this conversation. Welcome to the show is the race director of Swimrun Australia. They recently hosted their Gold Coast swim run. Actually, at the time of the recording, it was a week ago, I believe. And we're going to get an extended race report. Interestingly, though, this is our second time covering a swim run in the Gold Coast, because years and years ago, we had Ty Dokes on of the Burleigh swim run to talk about his cool community event. That's episode 63. But welcome to the show, Adriel Slade.
Hi, glad to be here. Excited.
We're excited as well, and we're all bundled up in winter, and you got a T-shirt on. It's full on summer down there, huh?
Yeah, I actually live on the Gold Coast, so it's pretty much summer here all year round. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Must be nice.
Lucky. Perfect. For swim running.
We really can't complain though.
Yeah, we're in California, so we're
It's like
pretty spoiled.
Florida of Australia.
Yeah,
that's not too bad. So you run Swimrun Australia. You put on, from what I can tell, 3 events from the website, and then how did you discover Swimrun, and what made you want to put on a series?
Yeah, I guess my background here is predominantly in ocean swimming. So ocean swimming in Australia, or might be referred to as open water swimming around the rest of the world, has been a big part of the Australian landscape for 40, 50 years. Mm-hmm. So there's hundreds, maybe 250, 300 ocean swim events, community events on around Australia every year. And
wow.
I've been running a business called Ocean Fit for 15 years out of Bondi Beach to start with, which was incredible. And that was all about teaching people how to get into ocean swimming and be a part of these ocean swims. And more recently, just before I got into Swimrun, actually, I took over another another business called oceanswims.com, which is, I guess, the home of ocean swimming in Australia. It has a big ocean swimming event calendar and magazine and all this type of thing. So I guess I've kind of been in that ocean swimming space. And on top of that, I've also been involved in surf lifesaving since I was 14. So I'm in my mid-40s now. So that's a long time being involved in surf lifesaving. And over here, for those around the rest of the world, surf lifesaving is a volunteer organisation that provides lifeguarding services on the beaches on the weekends. But there's also a sport involved in that as well. They have surf Ironman racing. Surf swimming is a big part of that sport as well. So I guess I've just been involved in that side of kind of swimming.
Can I ask you a question? How much time do you spend in the ocean versus on land? Because it seems like you're spending most of your time in the ocean.
This is kind of like a pre-children, post-children question.
Yes.
So pre-children, I would be in the ocean for hours a day, and many, many hours on the weekends. Post-children, I struggle to get to the beach except when I'm teaching, but my children are now kind of nearly 3 and nearly 5, so I feel like we're past that hard stage, and we're going to probably spend a lot more time at the beach now. Same with surfing. I do a lot of surfing, or I used to do a lot of surfing, but I haven't for a few years now, and I'm kind of hoping once the kids get into it, I can then start getting back into these types of things. But yeah, I still spend a lot of time at the beach.
All right, and then.
Yeah, so the swim run is kind of exciting because I actually, with all the swimming I do, I actually like running more than swimming, which sounds ridiculous, but I've always just loved this idea of just being able to put your shoes on and run out the front door and go for a run. I never take any technology. I just love being in, just running around. I get some of my best ideas from running. So running's always been something I'm interested in. Trail running, even better, because it kind of just mixes this whole idea of adventure as well as fitness, and so that was good. And so I've kind of always had a swim and a run. Those were my main individual sports, I guess. And actually, when I lived in Auckland, because I'm a Kiwi by birth and an Australian by adulthood, I guess you would say. So I'm dual citizen. I was born in New Zealand, and some of my early days in Auckland in the early 2000s, they had this awesome series over there called Stroke and Stride. And I guess it wasn't a swim run, but it was a really popular swim run series that would be on every Thursday night, I think, at the time. And that's probably my very first taste of the whole swim run kind of concept.
Yeah.
And so I always loved that. And ever since I've been in Australia, I was kind of thinking, gee, we should be doing this over here. But a lot of those types of events are really based on like, can you find the right place and kind of make it all works? And I can probably talk about this later. You can have great ideas about events and all this type of stuff, and when they're in the idea stage, they're amazing. Yeah. And then once you put your race director cap on, the questions get harder and harder, and all of a sudden, this amazing idea, just kind of fizzles out. But but more recently in 2016, that was when Adriel Young. He put on Swimrun Australia, his very first event. That was actually the first swim run in Australia. And so we know Adriel now. He's gone on. He just won the
legend.
Oh yeah.
He's a legend.
5-time world champion now or something.
Yeah, so he's a pretty big deal. And so I had known Adriel through surf lifesaving in Bondi, where he was lifeguarding. I actually I was just starting to date my now wife, and we saw this swim run was being put on, and I was like, man, this is like my perfect event. There's no cycling, and that's great for me because I have no interest in cycling at all. And this idea of multiple runs and swims was like, wow, could there be anything better for me? Because it's a bit more exciting than just a run, swim, run. You get to, go on this journey, plus it's adventure. And I was just like, wow, why of all these aquathons I've done, of all these runs I've done for 20, 30 years, did I not even come up with the idea of like adding more swims and more runs to it?
Just keep going.
Just one and done. And
it's like, how did it take this long to think of adding more swims and runs to a run, swim, run? So I remember sitting at a table with my wife, and I'm trying to impress her, and I'm like, why don't we do this event? And I'm like, all right, okay. I don't know, we'll see how this goes. So we signed up for it. The event sold out, and we did this event. Now, this was the crazy part, and the fact that we're still together as a husband and wife is, I don't even understand how this has happened. Because I'm very much about doing the event just to enjoy it, to enjoy the scenery, to be in the moment. But I quickly found out that she was not that person. She was head down, focused.
She's racing.
We're racing, we could be. And I remember there were 2 moments in the race when, and this race is amazing that Adriel put together. You actually, you run towards the heads at the entry to Sydney Harbour, so you get to look at that. When you're running back, you see the Sydney Opera House and you see the Sydney Harbour Bridge in the distance, and it's all, it's amazing. I lived in Sydney for 15 years, and and that was, I could see that stuff every day. But when you did in the race, you still were like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to this one point where you could see both the Sydney Opera House and Sydney Harbour, and I'm like, Jules, how amazing is this? Look at that. And I started slowing down a bit, and all I heard was, keep going. It's not time to stop. There's someone behind us. And I'm like, oh, gee, okay, all right. We keep running. And then just about towards the end, there's this a bit of a beach run towards the end, and we were running along the hard sand, and there was a flag up in the soft sand, and we kind of thought, oh, do we have to go around it? So we decided to run up into the soft sand to go around the flag and down. And at that moment, like as soon as I hit the soft sand, those muscles that sit inside your thighs there, they just like tighten right up, and I literally couldn't walk. And so I look around, and Jules has got 10 meters ahead. She looks around, and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I can't walk. And she's like, you have to walk. So that was my experience of the first swim run, but needless to say, I got hooked on it then, and I did one the year after, or the year after that, when I filled in for someone whose partner had pulled out at the 2 days before the race, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'll just jump in and do it. But I hadn't trained for that one specifically, so I said, mate, I'll get you around the course. I'll help. I'll be all good in the swims, but some of those runs I'll just will be a killer for me. But no, that was all good. So that was like kind of my introduction to swim run. Got excited about it, and then just about 18 months ago, Adriel had a really good run. He'd run 4 events at that same spot, and then we all know COVID hit, and Adriel's got a Swedish wife. He's moved over to Sweden, and he really wanted the event to continue on, and I said, look, I'll take it on and continue his legacy, and see if I can't take it to the next level as well, and grow some events and grow the sport here. So that's
what you're up to now.
Now we have 3 events, and we're looking for a few more. But
awesome, and as Chris mentioned at the top of the show, you just wrapped up the Gold Coast swim run there, which was a two distance 5.5K and then a 12.5K option. What's the race director report on that one, the quick and dirty?
Yeah, it was really exciting actually. We initially had and I know that what I'm calling short and long is very different to what short and long is overseas, but our short event here was 12.5K. We did initially have a 20K enduro event planned, but we quickly found out early in the piece that we probably didn't give people enough time to train for it, so we just weren't getting the numbers in that big event. So we cut that one out early and threw in a super sprint distance of about 5.5, 6K. And yeah, we were pretty excited. We had a good turnout. We had a really nice morning. I guess what was different about this one is that there was a couple of ocean swims, and perhaps even different to ocean swims that have been part of other swim runs in the US. There were a couple where you actually had to swim out through decent surf to get out, and that hadn't been done here before, and I hadn't quite seen it overseas either, so I didn't quite know how this would turn out. But yeah, it proved a pretty decent challenge. Early morning we had light winds, and so the front markers, they got some really nice clean water conditions, and then the back markers, once the wind got up during the race, they had a bit more of a challenging wind swell, and people were losing shoes, body surfing into the beach and all this crazy stuff. And because you kind of think, all the swim runs you see around the world are, tend to be in lakes and all these like beautiful, calm waterways. And I'm sending these athletes out in the surf, and it's about 3 to 4 foot wind swell, and we can't get them right out the back of the surf, but we've got them in this little gutter. And yeah, it's wild. I've seen some of the drone footage, and people are wild. We're getting washed around like a washing machine. But I haven't seen anyone body surf in a swim run event before, and I got to see it on the drone just recently. So that was pretty cool. And the Gold Coast is, for people that haven't been here, you kind of see the pictures of all these big long golden sand beaches and the surf. But there's actually a couple of creeks here. Tallybudgera Creek and Currumbin Creek, which are actually really beautiful, and they're kind of like little inland waterways, and they have nice boardwalks that run around them, and the water's actually really nice and beautiful. And so the people that had come from out of town that weren't from the Gold Coast, at the end they were like, wow, I didn't realize there were these nice creeks and things to swim through. So that was part of the reason why we just put the event on and got it happening really quickly, so we could get this footage to show people from around Australia, hey, the Gold Coast is not just about these big, long, beautiful beaches. There's actually these really nice inland waterways, which allows us to have some variety in the swim legs. So yeah, it was really good.
Awesome. And what was the how were you happy with the turnout, and what would you say the mix was between people brand new to swimrun and folks that you had been seeing for a few years?
It was 95% new. Because we're in a brand new, so we've, the first event we ran was, obviously Sydney has been the Sydney East event, which is what we call it now, which was the original. That's been run for 5 years now. So there's a community of people in Sydney who have heard about swimrun for a long time. They know what it's all about. They've seen it. A lot of them do the race every year. And so there's kind of that community there of people that kind of know about it. And so when we put on our Sydney North event, which is on the north side of the harbour, back in October, that went really well because we weren't having to educate the community about what swimrun was. They kind of had seen it, so we were just kind of giving them a little bit more information and trying to make it exciting, so it wasn't hard to sell. And that was a beautiful event. That's probably my favourite course. But the Gold Coast one, the Queensland, which is the state that the Gold Coast is in, they had never seen it before, and so it was a big educational play at the beginning. So we weren't just trying to get people to enter this specific event. We were having to educate them about what swimrun was, and nice. And then so we had a lot more questions of, oh, do you definitely run in your shoes, or can I just do it barefoot? And so we just had a lot more of that going on. Yeah. And the first race anywhere is always the hardest. You've just got to get it run. You've got to get that footage, that imagery, and then when people can actually see it and other people are talking about it, then it will be a lot easier. But we had our range here in Australia normally goes from around, your teenagers, which we don't get too many of yet, but I'm hoping to grow that. But we have a really big portion of our competitors who are in their kind of 50s, 60s, and a strong older female contingent as well, having a go. So that's really cool. We just here, I'm purposely making swimrun a sport that isn't just for the elite or for the big athlete, because we just don't have that market here to be able to run events just for your elite adventure races. We have to make this sport here for your everyday swimmer or your everyday runner who's going to train a bit more in their weaker discipline and just have a crack. So no, I'm pretty excited. I love the variety of people, because if you looked at the event here and I took a photo of our participants and then I look at an event at some of the bigger races around the world, you'd be like, oh, what? Gee, they look a bit, are they athletes?
No, we ask that question of ourselves all the time.
No, that's athletes.
Let me ask you about so in terms of downloads of the show, Australia is the number 6 country. USA is top, then Sweden, UK, smattering of European countries, and then we have, and Canada's up there, but then we have Australia. So I'm curious, you obviously have the finger on the pulse of race registrations and what that looks like. Can you give us a sense of kind of what the swimrun, like where the swimrun scene is at? I mean, you're talking about that's a bunch of beginners and stuff like that, but are you sort of feeling like there's more communication, more knowledge about the sport?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it was quite interesting. This morning I was at the swimming pool at Squad, and I saw a couple of the swimrun caps from the weekend, and so I started talking to them, because they were already wearing them training, and I talked to these two ladies that had come from Melbourne to race, and so they had travelled across the country to be a part of this event, and they were saying that they've already been online and they were watching YouTube videos of the swim runs overseas and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think I've heard you guys talk about it before. Like once you get someone into it once, there's this kind of like bug, you get the bug, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I can do this, and what's next for me, and where does this go from here? So, we're at the moment we're kind of in this phase here where we really need more events, and that's why when I took over, I worked really quickly to get more up straight away. So, the first event I ran in Australia was in April this year, and then I've already run two more in two different locations. So, because the key is we just got to have more events so that people, if it's only one or two a year, people don't really speak of themselves as swim runners. They just, we'll just go and do this event. It's kind of cool and different this year. So you really need multiple events so that people train to be a swim runner. They have a program of events during the year that they feel they can, have a regular goal and things like that. So if we don't have the numbers, we just won't. We'll have people will have a fleeting interest in it, and they'll duck in and out once or twice a year, but they won't. I don't think they'll be swim runners. So I think that's really important. We need more events, and there are some other events in WA. Hot on the heels of the very first Sydney swim run from Adriel Rottnest. Swim run started up, and they ran that for 3 years just before COVID, and that to me is probably one of the more kind of epic locations for a swim run in Australia, because it is circumnavigating an island. It's 33 kilometres, which is quite rare to be able to find a course like that in Australia. And there's another event in WA, the Transcape swim run, which is exciting as well. That's 26 kilometres. Unfortunately, WA, people don't understand the scale of Australia. It's bigger than the US and Canada. If you live in Sydney, getting to WA is a 6-7 hour flight, and it's a whole day to get there type scenario. You don't just pop over to WA to do an event type of thing. Whereas the East Coast is a lot more accessible. So we haven't seen Rottnest come back. I have talked to the gang there before, but for someone like me who lives on the East Coast, trying to run anything in WA would be like, I might as well go and run it in, China. Like it's just, but the Transcape guys seem to be consistent with their event, which is great. We had a new event in Jervis Bay this year, which is south of Sydney. So those guys have thrown one in there as well. So at the moment, we've got 4 events that seem to be kind of on the calendar now, which is good. We're definitely looking at more locations. But I guess my strategy at the moment for Swimrun Australia is just to make the sport accessible. And to do that, we need to have them close to the major populations. And that's why I run them in Sydney. And the Gold Coast, that's really accessible to Brisbane. We're looking at a Melbourne location. And so they may not be these, when you kind of think of swimrun, you think, let's go into the wilderness and be totally away from everything. But that's wonderful for the participants and that, but it's just very, very hard from an organisation point of view to make that work. So I think if we're going to set up for the longevity of swimrun in Australia, we need a good base first. And so we just need really accessible events that people can do easily. And once we build up those numbers and we build up, the excitement, then we can look at, the odd event that's a bit trickier to organise, but a bit more fulfilling as far as adventure and
sure. Yeah, something more in line with like the European sort of World Series quote unquote style event. Yeah,
but Australia's a little bit different in that we don't have these beautiful archipelagos and Great Lakes and things in Australia. A lot of the flat water locations in Australia are full of sharks and deadly stingers and crocodiles and all that type of stuff. So yeah, you could run an event in a cool set of islands up in northern Queensland, but it'll be how many of you are going to finish the race type of thing, and not because of injury, but because you're still alive. Finding races where we can have a good distance, getting up into that 30, 40 kilometers without having to have circuits.
Multiple,
those are very, very difficult to find, and that's why that Rottnest one's exciting as well. And then most of the waterways in Australia are on the beaches, and the problem with running events on beaches is that you have the surf, and so if it's flat, you're going to be fine. But if the surf gets up, then you have to cancel those swim legs, and so I'm kind of averse to running any event that has too much surf beaches in it, because the anxiety is too crazy as an event organizer. You may or may not be able to deliver for the participants. So you really have to find events that are in flat water locations that have less chance of being cancelled, and that's what you're weighing up is, there's some amazing locations here that you could run events in but you would have to have the perfect window and the perfect conditions, and no one likes turning up to a 30k race that promises swims and they end up doing a run, a 30k run,
trail run,
especially if you're like in a wetsuit or something.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about having, when you standing up the race in the Gold Coast, like having to educate the locals. I'd love to hear more about, how you do that, because it's the same thing here. Events in the U.S., we were talking to a race director that was putting on a race in Massachusetts and Cape Cod, and they had all these questions about the tether and stuff like that, which was interesting for us to hear, because one of the questions was like, well, isn't it dangerous? Like, isn't that like a choking hazard in the water? And we're like, well, we've never heard that before. Like, no one's ever mentioned that as a possibility. But I'm curious, when you are educating local officials, whether it's police, permitting agencies, whatever, what are you telling them? I'm just curious.
Yes, it's very interesting, and I did have a little bit of a problem with that on the Gold Coast, talking to the local authorities, because they're used to giving permits out for, let's say, triathlons and ocean swims, but they'd never really come across this idea of a swim run. And the major difference is that if we're talking about educating authorities, is that in an ocean swim or a triathlon, the swim happens in one location. In a triathlon, it's at the very beginning of the race. In an ocean swim, well, it is the only thing. So everyone's in the water at the same time. They're all within a certain space.
More manageable.
So it's very, very manageable. And so in their minds, they have this picture of like, hundreds of people all in the water at once and all this madness. And I have to say to them, look, at this particular swim, people are going to be drip feeding through, and there might be 300, 400 people in the event, but at any one time in that water space, there might only be 12 people in the water. And they'll be like, oh no, but you got 500 people in the event. I'm like, and they'll say, oh, you need 3 boats and 4 rescue boards and this. And I'm like, no. We're going to hit, if I go with your plan, we're going to have more people on rescue craft than we're going to have in the water. And so I got to negotiate a little bit, but even then they still don't really understand. So hopefully next time, I can say, hey, here's a picture of when the most people were coming through this location. This is where they were. This is how many people were there, and we can be a bit more manageable. Because every time you add an extra boat, you've got it's more money, and you've got more people to get in charge with, and you've got more issues, and so you're just trying to find that right balance. But for the most part, we've been quite the hardest part is that people think when you run an event like a swim run somewhere, you're going to have just bulk people all in one space, and so the education is like, hey, no, we're not doing that. We're just literally drip feeding. So even though we're coming through this busy area, it's going to seem this is just a few extra people coming through. Right. It's not going to make a big difference. So that's probably the education on that side. We do find it a lot easier to get through councils and that, because we're not locking down any roads. We don't have traffic management. We don't have any of that type of thing. So the course is completely open. We don't stop anything. So they kind of like that part. It's like, oh, so you're not closing a road? No. You don't want exclusive use of this? No.
Approved.
That's been pretty good. Yeah. and then from the people who we want to be involved in the sport, like I said before, for me, a lot of it was about getting imagery of just everyday people and just saying, hey, this is just, so that people could see other people that look like them doing it.
Yeah.
So they can say, if that person looks like me and they're doing it, it can't be that hard, whatever. So a lot of that kind of that imagery and making sure that we're doing that. And I guess I've learned a lot this year really about, we try to keep, I personally want to keep Swimrun as traditional as possible. And I know, because no one really owns the event anymore. And that was the great thing about the owners or the guys who started the sport. They've kind of let it just organically propagate around the world. And people can interpret it however they like, I guess. Yeah. But I do love this romance of the team racing. And then like other operators around the country, we've, gone, well, yeah, teams racing's good, but it also is quite restricting to getting people into it. So, we've got this individual thing over here, and I've kind of struck the balance of making the longest courses team race only. And so, if you really want to do this cool long course, the 20 kind of K option, you still have to be part of a team, and that's the hook,
Yeah, nice.
And I'll be like, well, yes, you can do it individually, but you'll have to do the half, the shorter course. And those really, a lot of people will go, I don't know if I like it. So we making sure we've got those stepping stones, like the sprint courses of around 5, 7K, the short ones of around 10, 12, 13K. So people can come in by themselves without committing to someone else, have a crack, and then if they really like it, find a teammate, do the longer distances.
Love it. Yeah. Do you ever get anyone come through the first one like that was, I'm going to go another lap if you don't mind? I'll have another one.
It's the Wild West out there for the most part. I mean, we put courses in and we put flags where you come in and out, but people just they'll find their own way. They're not. And I sometimes I get to the finish and I'm like, where's your swim kit? Where's your shoes? It's like, yeah, who knows? But if you tried to control every swimmer or every participant, it'd be mad out there. But yeah, so even now looking at the equipment. Making sure that people understand that they don't need to race with pedals, they don't need to race with a pull buoy, they don't, those types of things. So, so I think some of the ideas that we've got coming out of the 3 events this year is just to have a much bigger educational section on the website and just really make it easy for people to understand that, hey, if you just want to race in your swimsuit, your vest, and a cap, that's it. You don't, in shoes, that's it. That's totally fine. If you want to run in, because we have people in Australia, I don't know if you've seen this overseas yet, but do you know, we would call them just Speedos or briefs, swimsuits?
Yeah.
Some of the guys are just wearing their briefs and a vest and a cap, and that's it for the whole race. So whether you want to just wear that or whether you want to wear wetsuit shorts or a wetsuit, or if you want to put on paddles, and we've got some people that have got paddles the size of dinner plates and other people that
we've seen those.
Yeah, and then the Gold Coast one was interesting because you had the surf as well. So that I said before, someone lost their shoes body surfing, but if you're trying to duck dive under waves, you've got a 3-foot wave coming and you need to get underneath it, but you're wearing a wetsuit and you've got a pull buoy. That's not really conducive for getting underneath the water. So it's very different, but. I guess it's more about, hey, this is quite a relaxed sport, the way that we're running it. Here's a couple of things that you need to wear: shoes, your vest and your cap. But other than that, wear whatever you like, kind of thing. So it becomes...
Yeah, I really, really love that from your site as well. I mean, you have it literally on the homepage, like a race for every body, not one word, 2 words. So I love the inclusivity there and the really openness, and that's something that we've been trying to drive here because at the end of the day, like, people are having a good time just being out there and doing the thing, whether that's the 5K one or the bigger one or the World Championship. There, and we've seen people of all shapes and sizes do it all. Rather impressively.
And I guess I'm kind of been referring to them more internally than externally. I guess the urban swimrun adventures, so the idea that you can wake up in the morning, drive to the start, do an adventure race, finish by mid-morning, drive home and have lunch at your local cafe. Like that's a pretty acceptable way to be involved in this sport. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think, you were talking about the education piece, which is so important. And I think, first of all, thank you for including us under the resources on the website.
Good looking out. Providing
podcasts, advice, how-to, and memes.
So, love it.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. There's an organization in the UK, As Keen as Mustard events, where they put on these really interesting events that are essentially, they're less swim runs and more like swim run party, or I don't know, it's just like it's like a gathering. It's not a race, but I think they still charge something for like the safety boats and whatnot, but it just makes it no barrier to entry. Try out your suit, look as silly as you want, have as much fun as you want, go as far as you want, kind of thing. And anecdotally, what we hear about that is that that's been really great in terms of just sort of, like, as you mentioned, trying to build like a bigger base of people. Like, we're firm believers, and I'm curious if you would co-sign on this, that we just need to get people to try it. If we can get people to try it, the rest, for the most part, is going to take care of itself. Is that something you'd agree with?
Absolutely. And one of the things from a race director's point of view is when you put on a race, you have a whole set of fixed costs. You've got a venue that you've paid for. You've got all the things that go into that you're going to pay for no matter how many people are involved in the event. And so one of the things that you think about is, okay, no, we've got all this stuff here. What else can we do on that day? Mm-hmm. Because we've got permission to be there all day. We've got all the facilities for the day, all the infrastructure. So what else can we do? And so we start thinking, well, why don't we put on just like a mini run series that people can just do in their bare feet and, without any equipment? Or can we get, the kids down there with their family just doing something where it might only be, it might be just a run, but that's a stepping stone to, a run. So yeah, there's lots of, and we're thinking about that now. How can we make it more of a festival of swim run for the day? Because we've gone to all this effort of getting the site ready for this event. What are all those other add-ons that can pull in someone who's not quite ready for this distance, but would do this distance, someone who's just wants to put their toe into it. Maybe if it's a pricing thing for someone, they might be willing to get involved up to a certain price point, but after that, it's probably out of their reach, or those types of things. So yeah, and I'll have to look up the one that you're talking about, because one of the things that I'm big on when I put my ocean swims cap on in Australia is that the sport needs to work together to grow. And one of my pet hates is organisers that keep everything to themselves. Mm-hmm. It does no good for them. It does no good for the sport. It's just an ego thing. And every organiser needs to be sharing openly all their ideas, all their contacts. We understand the barriers. You don't go and put a race on next to
the same weekend,
right? Yeah.
That's kind of helping you out. And I mean, those are the unwritten rules. But apart from that, we should all be sharing everything, because I'm a marketer in a different life, and it's if we grow the industry, if we grow the market, your slice of the pie just gets bigger. Like it might be the same slice of the pie, but that pie gets bigger, so your slice gets bigger. And the more events, people say to me, "Oh, someone else is putting on a swim run in Australia." I go, "Great,
yeah,
wicked!" Like the more the merrier. Like if I had more swim runs in Australia, then my events are going to get bigger, because we're going to have more swim runners doing swim run events, and we're going to have more more events advertising swim run, and so that will get in front of more people. And one of the hardest things about being an event director is, your advertising budget. You're just never going to reach everyone. And the classic you hear is you put on an event and someone goes, "Oh, I didn't hear about that event. You can't have been advertising much." And I'll be like, "Well, actually we were, but, Australia's got 25 million people in here. And if I had to advertise, on a frequency of 3 or 4, every person who swims and runs in Australia, I'd go broke, So we just need more people advertising the sport to more people, and no one person's going to do it by themselves. So the more we work together, the better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point about just having like more events. I mean, we see that in the U.S., Chipper, where it's like, you know, we know people who, there's like 2 events that happened in North Carolina, the state of North Carolina, and a lot of those folks had really not done swim runs outside of that state. You know, this year a bunch of folks went up to a race in Maine and things like that. But it's like, yeah, you almost just need just more events, as you mentioned, to make the pie bigger. And also to, you know, if people are, I mean, I'm sure I can speak for Chipper, if we're traveling anywhere, we're just checking real quick to see if there's a swim run happening that weekend.
What's going on.
Just in case, you know. So, you know, if there's events for tourists and things like that as well, I mean, it's great.
I did that exact thing this week because my wife's Canadian, so we head to Canada almost yearly. So we're heading there this year, and I just jumped straight on to find out if there is an event, and there is actually, but we're going on a Disney cruise for the kids. So the event, I think it's like maybe the 11th of August is there one, and then
is it Edmonton
on the like 27th of August maybe, or something like that. Anyway,
interesting.
They're almost in the perfect time for me, but they're unachievable on this trip, which is scary. But yeah, I do the same thing now.
I wouldn't trust Goofy. He doesn't seem like a great partner to swim run with. He's a little coordinated enough.
We often Toronto's home base for Jules' family, and we up in the cottage country up there. There was an event. I'm not sure if it's still running or it ever got off the ground. I can't remember, but we definitely had our eyes on that one at one stage when we thought we would.
Nice. Awesome. Well, you're doing all the right things, which music to our ears. We love to hear that you're welcoming everybody. You're excited to see the sport grow. You're not trying to go too big too fast, and you're really respecting the sort of the origin of the story and carrying on the good work that Adriel Young has done as well. So this is all music to our ears, and we know a few folks down there that will be happy to hear you're looking for additional swimrun locales come next year. And
we do really want to try and get at least one long one happening a year. And I just recently listened to the podcast about the new qualifying for the World Championship. And I just couldn't help but feel a little bit, it's going to be hard for anyone who's really into the sport here to ever kind of qualify for that, because we're just never going to know the costs of traveling to Europe and US to get enough points to be involved in it are going to be insurmountable, I think, for most. So I'm kind of hoping that I can work with that team there to maybe get a merit race, at least. A merit race, or just an Oceania event place each year or something like that. That would give our guys something to strive for that would otherwise be out of reach, because we are down under, which means we're a long way from anywhere else. But
for sure,
be amazing.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. I mean, I think it's like, you know, for people that want to go on that journey to the World Championship, and we recommend it. You know, it's incredible experience. You know, highly recommended if you're into that sort of thing. Yeah, you're just really challenged. Basically, it's a financial challenge, really. You either have to go director's choice, or just spend a lot of money, which is, you know, not cool.
That's not easy.
We actually had a big crew from New Caledonia at our Sydney North event recently, and they're running. I think they've got a merit status for their Numere event, so that's in the vicinity of Oceania, but it's still going to be hard for these guys. So hopefully we can kind of work on a way of. Because one of the things that I think is important about growing the sport here is having local stories, having stories about our athletes that are participating in these big events around the world. And I'll definitely be making sure that I hear, or I know of and hear, people that decide to go over and compete in any of the big events, so that we can write about it. We can make, you know, we can share that story and make it, you know, something, a big goal for others that are doing some of our more kind of, because we're going to obviously have our own swimrun culture in Australia, which is going to look very different than overseas, but still it looks, you know, those going overseas is still going to be, you know, the pinnacle for some of these guys. And if they can find another way of getting there without, you know, mortgaging the house, it would probably be exciting. But in any sport, you need to have, you know, those guys that are competing in these big events and like that. And it's good having Adriel as an Australian rep, and he still flies the flag. It's just unfortunately doesn't live in Bondi anymore.
Yeah, for sure. We interviewed him a few years ago, and this was during COVID, so he had to stay in some hotel. So him and his family flew to Australia for the holidays, and he was held up in a hotel for a week or something.
All right, because it was like a quarantine.
Yeah, he had a quarantine before being allowed.
Yeah, that's right.
Crazy.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Weird.
Well, Andre, it's been awesome chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time and letting us, get a finger on the pulse of the scene in Australia and everything you're doing to help grow the sport. I mean, you're doing exactly what we're trying to do, but it's much harder. Your job is much harder than ours. All we need to do is talk. You're actually putting on events. Thank you so much for everything you're doing to help grow the sport. And if we're ever flying to Australia, we'll make sure to try to link up some dates here to make at least one of these races work.
You have three events for 2024, and for more info, be sure to head to swimrun.com.au.
Yeah.
That's where you find that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. It's great. I've been listening to you a lot recently just to get the lowdown. So I feel like I've filled up my my pot of swimrun knowledge through your podcast.
Well, we have a deep pool to pull from if you need any more.
Your couple runneth over.
Yeah. But thanks, Andre, again for your time, and congrats on all the success down there. And we're rooting on for you.
Thank you very much.
That's all it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a rating or review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Check out our website, lowtideboys.com. That's boys with a Z, for swimrun resources, including gear guides, tips, how-to videos, and so much more. Make sure to check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boys on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, send us a DM or email us at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swim run and other activities.
Lots of activities.
Lots of activities.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Then a run.
And then a swim.
Then another run.
Then another swim.
Then run some more.
Just keep going.
Let's go.
And then stop at some point because,
And fuel. Don't forget to fuel.
Gotta fuel
too. Of course, yes.